I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I'd become invisible in my own life, but at 64, that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Elara Winslow, and 2 years ago, my world shattered when my husband William passed away after 42 years of marriage. The silence in our home became unbearable. Every corner held memories of his laugh, his gentle touch, the way he'd bring me wildflowers from our garden every Sunday morning. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone," my son Cassian had said at the funeral, his arm around my shoulder. "Come live with us. We have plenty of room." His wife Vera nodded beside him, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "The kids would love having Grandma around," she added, her voice sweet as honey but somehow hollow. I should have noticed the warning signs then. I sold my little house across town, the one William and I had saved for 20 years to buy. I gave Cassian and Vera $45,000 from the sale to help with their mortgage. "Consider it an investment in our family," I told them, thinking I was securing my place in their home. That first month was almost normal. I had my own room with my own furniture. I cooked Sunday dinners. I helped the grandchildren with homework. I felt useful, but things changed so gradually I barely noticed at first. "The blue plates are for special occasions only. Elara," Vera said one evening, taking away the dishes I'd set out for dinner. "We'll use the everyday ones." My Social Security check of $1,200 a month suddenly became my contribution to household expenses. Then my pension of $800 joined it. When I mentioned saving some for myself, Cassian looked hurt. "Mom, do you know how expensive it is to feed and house another person? We're struggling as it is." So I gave them everything, believing I was helping the family I loved. My friends stopped calling. When I mentioned this to Cassian, he shrugged. "Martha said you told her you were too busy for lunch dates now." But I'd said no such thing. My sister Helen's weekly calls dwindled, then stopped. "Helen thinks you're angry with her," Cassian explained when I asked. "Something about you saying she was a bitter old maid who should mind her own business." The words were so cruel, so unlike anything I would ever say, that I was speechless. By the time I found my voice to deny it, Cassian had walked away. Months passed, and my world shrank to the four walls of their suburban home. My clothes began to wear thin, but when I mentioned shopping, Vera sighed about expenses. Meanwhile, I noticed her closet filling with new designer outfits. "We have to maintain appearances for Cassian's job," she explained when she caught me looking. "Image is everything in corporate America." And I rationed my arthritis medication, taking it every other day instead of daily as prescribed, after overhearing Vera complain about astronomical pharmacy bills to her friend on the phone. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd become such a burden to the son I'd raised with so much love. William would have known what to do. William would have stood up for me. But William was gone, and I was alone in a house full of people who seemed to look through me rather than at me. I told myself to be patient, to be grateful. This was family, after all. What other choice did I have? It was a Tuesday evening in October when everything came to a head. I was preparing dinner, a simple beef stew that had been Cassian's favorite since childhood. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and as I carried a stack of plates to the table, they slipped from my grasp. The crash seemed to echo through the house as ceramic shattered across the tile floor. "What have you done now?" Vera's voice cut through the air as she rushed into the kitchen, her face already flushed with anger. "I'm sorry," I said, kneeling to pick up the broken pieces. Your hands just what can't hold anything anymore. That's the third dish this month." "Elara," she towered over me, her designer heels inches from my fingers. I'll replace them, I promised. Though we both knew I couldn't afford to, every penny I had went into their bank account. With what money, she scoffed. You're completely dependent on us. Do you know what a burden that is? The word stung. Burden. Is that all I was to them now? I contribute my Social Security and pension, I said quietly, still gathering shards of broken plate. That's over $2,000 a month. And you think that covers everything. The food you eat, the electricity you use, the space you take up. A shard of ceramic cut into my finger, and I winced as a drop of blood fell to the white tile. Vera didn't seem to notice or care. I sold my house to help you with your mortgage, I reminded her, my voice stronger than I expected. I gave you my life savings. Something changed in Vera's expression then. A coldness crept into her eyes that made me shrink back instinctively. And you never let us forget it, do you? She stepped closer, forcing me to crane my neck to look up at her. Poor martyred Ilara, always reminding everyone of her sacrifices. I struggled to my feet, suddenly unwilling to remain in such a vulnerable position. That's not fair. Vera, I've never... The slap came so quickly I didn't see it coming. My cheek burned from the impact, and I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the counter hard enough to bruise. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth where my teeth had cut my inner lip. You're dead weight in our lives, Vera hissed, her voice low and venomous. Go live in the dump where you belong. I stood frozen, hand pressed to my stinging cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. In all my 64 years, no one had ever struck me. Not once. What's going on in here? Cassian appeared in the doorway, taking in the broken dishes, my shocked expression, Vera's angry stance. My heart lifted momentarily. Surely my son, my boy, would defend me. Surely he would be horrified that his wife had just physically assaulted his mother. Cassian, I began, my voice trembling. Your mother broke another set of dishes. Vera interrupted, and then had the nerve to lecture me about how much money she gives us, as if we're not drowning trying to support her. I looked at my son in disbelief. That's not what happened. She hit me, Cassian. She slapped me across the face. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. Then he looked at Vera, whose expression had transformed to one of wounded innocence, complete with glistening eyes. Mom's becoming more difficult every day, she said softly. The forgetfulness, the clumsiness, the mood swings. It's getting harder to manage. I am not having mood swings, I protested, indignation rising through my shock. Your wife just struck me, and you're standing there letting her lie about it. Cassian's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. He looked at me with cold eyes I barely recognized. Mom, Vera's right. You're making our lives difficult. The constant neediness, the complaints, the accidents. Each word hit me harder than Vera's slap had. This was my son, my Cassian, the baby I'd nursed through fevers, the boy I'd cheered for at every baseball game, the young man whose college tuition I'd worked 3 jobs to pay. Cassian, please, I whispered, reaching for him. He stepped back, avoiding my touch. I wish it had been you instead of Dad, he said, his voice flat and deliberate. At least he contributed something to this family. At least he was useful. The room tilted beneath my feet. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling as his cruel words echoed in my ears. You don't mean that, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Vera stepped closer to me, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my face. We've been talking, and we think it's time for you to go to one of those senior living places, where they can take proper care of you. The way she said it made it clear she wasn't talking about the nice assisted living communities with gardens and activities. She meant the state-run facilities where they warehouse elderly people with nowhere else to go. But this is my home now, I protested. My name is on the lease. I helped pay for this house. Cassian let out a harsh laugh. Actually, Mom, it's not. We had you sign some papers last month. Remember? You transferred your interest to us. The memory came back in fragments papers they told me were insurance documents, something about protecting my assets. I'd been so trusting, so eager to help them any way I could. You lied to me, I whispered, the full weight of their betrayal crushing down on me. You tricked me into signing away my rights to this house. Don't worry, Ilara, Vera said, her voice sickeningly sweet. We'll visit you sometimes, maybe on holidays, if we're not too busy. I looked around the kitchen that I'd cleaned every day for 2 years, at the stew I'd carefully prepared for a family that clearly despised me, and I felt something inside me break. Not my spirit, something else. The chains of guilt and obligation that had kept me silent for so long. Before I could respond, we heard the front door open, heavy footsteps approached the kitchen, and I felt a flicker of panic. Were they bringing in someone to physically remove me? Had they actually called authorities? But when the figure appeared in the doorway, my breath caught in my throat. Well, said a familiar voice, isn't this a charming family gathering? Noah Winslow stood in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit. My grandson Cassian's son from his first marriage, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. But this wasn't the struggling college student I remembered. This was a man in a tailored charcoal suit, with confident posture and keen eyes that quickly assessed the scene before him. Noah? Cassian's voice held surprise and something else wariness. What are you doing here? I came to check on Grandma Ilara, Noah said simply, his gaze shifting to me. His eyes widened slightly when he saw my reddened cheek, and it seems I arrived just in time. We're having a family discussion, Vera said, her tone instantly switching to sugary politeness. It's so nice to see you, Noah. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, Noah replied, his voice cool. He crossed the kitchen and stood beside me, his hand gently touching my shoulder. Grandma, are you okay? The simple kindness in his voice nearly undid me. It had been so long since anyone in this house had shown me genuine concern. I'm fine, Noah, I said automatically, the lie bitter on my tongue. Just a little disagreement. A disagreement that resulted in someone hitting you, he asked, his voice hardening as he looked at the mark on my face. Vera laughed nervously. No one hit anyone. Ilara is becoming confused. She dropped the dishes and got upset. You know how the elderly can be emotional, forgetful. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Is that right? He asked, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. Because that's not what it sounds like on this recording. The blood drained from Vera's face. Baisil. What recording? I've been recording every conversation in this house for the past 6 months, Noah said calmly. Grandma gave me permission to install security cameras when I told her I was worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. I stared at him in shock. I remembered Noah installing what he called a security system months ago, but I had no idea he'd been monitoring what went on in the house. You've been spying on us. Cassian's voice rose in outrage. That's illegal. Actually, it's not, Noah replied. Not when one of the homeowners consents to it. And Grandma Ilara is still legally a homeowner, despite your recent attempts to change that. He turned to me fully now, his expression softening. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the whole truth, Grandma, but I've been concerned about you for a long time. The changes in your behavior, the way you stopped calling people, the things you supposedly said to family friends, none of it added up. This is ridiculous, Vera snapped. You can't just barge in here with accusations and recordings. You're not even part of this family anymore. You walked out 2 years ago. Noah's face hardened again. I didn't walk out. I was pushed out because I questioned why Grandma suddenly sold her house and moved in here right after Grandpa died, because I noticed how quickly you two took control of her finances. He turned to his father. Did you think I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care what happened to her? Cassian shifted uncomfortably. Son, you don't understand the situation. Your grandmother needs specialized care. She's becoming difficult to manage. We're just trying to do what's best for her. By slapping her. Noah's voice was like ice. By telling her you wish she was dead instead of Grandpa. By stealing her money and isolating her from everyone who cares about her. That's your idea of what's best. The room fell silent. I looked at Noah with new eyes. This wasn't just my grandson anymore. This was my defender, someone who had seen what was happening when I couldn't even fully see it myself. Noah, I said quietly, how do you know all this? He squeezed my shoulder gently. I'm a lawyer now. Grandma, I work for the Elder Justice Initiative. I've seen this pattern before: financial exploitation, emotional abuse, isolation. I recognized the signs when I visited 6 months ago, and you seemed so diminished, not like the strong woman who helped raise me. He glared at Vera and Cassian. So I started investigating. I talked to your old neighbors, your friends who suddenly weren't allowed to see you. I tracked your financial records, which wasn't hard since I work with the district attorney's office specifically on elder financial abuse cases. Vera's face had gone from white to red. You had no right. I had every right. Noah cut her off. When I suspect a crime is being committed against a vulnerable adult, I have not just the right, but the obligation to investigate. He turned back to me. Grandma, I want you to pack an overnight bag. You're coming to stay with me tonight. Tomorrow, we can figure out next steps. But right now, you need to be somewhere safe. She's not going anywhere, Cassian said, moving to block the doorway. This is her home. We take care of her. Noah's laugh was short and bitter. Take care of her, is that what you call this? He held up his phone again. I have 6 months of recordings documenting systematic emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and now physical assault. Would you like me to play some highlights for you? Or should I save that for the judge when I file for an emergency protective order tomorrow morning? Cassian's face paled. You wouldn't do that to your own father. Wouldn't I? Noah's voice was steady. You seem to have no problem doing much worse to your own mother. He turned to me again, his voice gentler. Grandma, will you go pack some things? Just enough for a few days. We can come back for the rest later. I hesitated, torn between decades of maternal instinct that made me want to smooth things over and the newfound realization that I was truly in danger in this house. This is still my son, I said quietly to Noah. Despite everything. Noah nodded. I know. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking. But right now, we need to get you somewhere safe. I looked at Cassian, searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised, any hint of remorse or love, but his expression was closed, calculating. Cassian, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, is this really what you want? To discard me like I'm nothing after everything we've been through together? For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps even shame. But then Vera placed her hand on his arm, and his expression hardened again. It's for the best, Mom, he said flatly. You'll see that eventually. In that moment, I knew Noah was right. I needed to leave. This wasn't my home anymore. Maybe it never had been. I'll get my things, I said quietly, and walked past Cassian toward the stairs. Noah followed close behind me, a protective presence I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. Noah's apartment was modest but comfortable, a one-bedroom in a renovated downtown building with exposed brick walls and tall windows. He insisted I take the bedroom while he would sleep on the pull-out couch. I'm sorry it's not much, he said, carrying my small suitcase into the bedroom. I wasn't planning on having a roommate. It's perfect, I assured him, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Now that we were away from Cassian's house, the adrenaline was wearing off, and exhaustion swept over me. My cheek still stung from Vera's slap, and my hip ached where I'd hit the counter. Noah sat beside me, his expression concerned. Grandma, we should document your injuries. It might be important later if we decide to press charges. Charges. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Against my own son. Against Vera, at least. Noah said gently. What she did was assault, plain and simple. I touched my cheek reflexively. I never thought it would come to this. Noah sighed deeply. Neither did I. But here we are. He hesitated, then asked, How long has it been this bad? The question opened a floodgate. Words poured out of me about the gradual isolation, the financial control, the subtle and not so subtle ways they had made me feel worthless and burdensome. Noah listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his phone. Why did you disappear from our lives? I finally asked him. After William got sick, you just vanished. Pain flashed across his features. I didn't vanish. Grandma, I was pushed out. Dad and Vera made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. Every time I tried to visit Grandpa in the hospital, they'd tell me he was too tired for visitors or that he'd specifically asked not to see me. William would never say that, I protested. He adored you. I know, Noah said quietly. That's why I knew something was wrong. But by the time I figured out what was happening, Grandpa was gone, and you had sold your house and moved in with them. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like William that it made my heart ache. I tried to talk to you about it, but you seemed different, defensive of them. You kept saying how generous they were to take you in, how much they needed your help with the mortgage. It was like you were repeating their lines. I remembered those conversations now, how I'd parroted Cassian and Vera's words without really thinking about what I was saying. How I'd convinced myself that giving them everything was the right thing to do. I was an easy target, I admitted. After William died, I was so lost, so desperate not to be alone. They took advantage of that. It's not your fault, Noah said firmly. Predators, and that's what they are, know exactly how to identify vulnerability and exploit it. When did you become so wise? I asked, attempting a smile despite everything. Working with elderly victims of financial abuse for the past 3 years will do that, he replied. After what happened with you and Grandpa, I knew I wanted to help prevent it from happening to others. That's why I joined the Elder Justice Initiative. A thought occurred to me. The security cameras. How did you really get them installed? Noah looked slightly sheepish. Remember when Cassian and Vera took that weekend trip to the coast about 6 months ago? You called me because the sink was leaking, and I came over to fix it. I nodded, the memory returning. You stayed for dinner, and I asked if I could install some security upgrades for your protection. I said. You agreed. His expression grew serious. I never lied about that part. The cameras and microphones were for your protection. I just didn't tell you I was monitoring them remotely because I was concerned about how they were treating you. And what did you discover? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Systematic emotional abuse, financial exploitation, isolation tactics. Noah pulled out his phone and opened a document. They've taken approximately $87,000 from you over the past 2 years. Your Social Security, your pension, the life insurance payout from Grandpa's policy, plus the money from the sale of your house. The numbers shocked me. I knew I'd given them my monthly income, but I hadn't realized how it had accumulated over time. Where did it all go? I asked weakly. They're always talking about how they're struggling financially. Noah's expression darkened. Vera's designer clothes, 3 vacations last year alone, a timeshare in Florida. Meanwhile, they've been making you ration your arthritis medication and wear the same clothes until they're threadbare. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from anger at them, but also at myself for being so blind. What about the papers they had me sign? I asked. Did I really sign away my rights to the house? They tried, Noah said grimly. But they made a mistake. The documents require notarization to be valid, and the notary stamp they used was expired. It's a felony to forge notary signatures. By the way, another charge we can add to the list. He reached for my hand. Grandma, I need to tell you something else. Something important that I discovered during my investigation. There was a heaviness in his voice that made me brace myself. What is it? It's about their future plans for you. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I found documents on Vera's computer. They were preparing to file for guardianship over you, claiming you were suffering from dementia and needed someone to make decisions on your behalf. Cold fear washed over me. But I don't have dementia. I know that, but they were building a case documenting your forgetfulness, your emotional outbursts, your inability to care for yourself. They even had a doctor lined up who was willing to provide a diagnosis without a proper evaluation. They were going to have me declared incompetent. The idea was so horrifying I could barely process it. Why? To gain complete control over your finances and any assets you still legally owned. Noah explained, including your portion of the house and the trust fund Grandpa set up for you that they haven't been able to access yet. Trust fund, I echoed. What trust fund? Noah looked surprised. You didn't know Grandpa set up a trust for you before he died. It's not huge, about $100,000, but it was meant to ensure you'd always have something of your own, something Cassian couldn't touch. I shook my head slowly. William never told me about any trust. Noah was quiet for a moment, then said, Actually, I think he might have, in his own way. He stood up. There's something else I need to show you. Something Grandpa gave me before he died. He left the room briefly and returned with a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with wax. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized the handwriting on the front. For Ilara, from your loving husband, William. Where did you get this? I whispered. Grandpa gave it to me the day before he died. Noah said quietly, He made me promise to give it to you only if things got really bad. Only if Dad proved he couldn't be trusted to take care of you? With trembling hands, I took the envelope. The wax seal broke easily, and inside was a single sheet of paper covered in William's careful handwriting. My vision blurred with tears as I began to read aloud. My dearest Ilara, if you are reading this, then our son has failed you in ways that break my heart. There are things I never told you about Cassian, things I discovered but kept to myself because I didn't want to hurt you. I looked up at Noah, confusion and fear warring in my chest. Noah, what does this mean? Keep reading, Grandma, he said gently. My eyes returned to the letter. I had a paternity test done when Cassian was 15 after I found some old letters his mother had hidden. Ilara, my love, Cassian is not my biological son. The words on the page blurred as tears filled my eyes. I read them again, then a third time, trying to make sense of what William was telling me. His real father was a man named James Mitchell, someone your first wife was involved with before you married. I never told you because I loved you both, and I raised Cassian as my own. But I want you to know that my will, my real will, reflects this truth. I couldn't continue reading. The letter trembled in my hands as decades of memories shifted and realigned themselves in my mind. Did you know about this? I asked Noah, my voice barely audible. He shook his head. Not until I read the letter. Grandpa gave it to me sealed, with strict instructions not to open it unless it became necessary to protect you. I thought back to my first marriage brief and trouble that had ended when Cassian was just a baby. William had come into our lives when Cassian was 3, and he'd been the only father my son had ever known. There had never been any question of William not being his biological father. They even shared similar features, or so I'd thought. But now, looking back, I could see the differences that William must have noticed. Cassian had always looked slightly different from William's side of the family. His eyes, his build, even his mannerisms were nothing like my late husband's. "There's more," Noah said gently, gesturing to the letter. I took a deep breath and continued reading. "I've instructed my attorney, Richard Goldstein, to keep my real will secure. If Cassian challenges it, there is DNA evidence to support my decision. The house is yours. Ilara, the savings account, the investments, everything is yours. Cassian is mentioned, but only as a recipient of $10,000, enough to help him start fresh, but nothing more. I've also set up a trust fund for you that only you can access. Noah knows the details and can help you claim it. I'm sorry for keeping these secrets from you. My love, I thought I was protecting you from pain. Perhaps I was only protecting myself from having to face difficult truths. But know this: every moment with you was a gift. You made my life complete in ways I never thought possible. All my love, now and always. William." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, my mind reeling with this new information. "So William knew," I said finally. "All those years, he knew Cassian wasn't his biological child, and he never said a word." "He loved you both," Noah said simply. "That's clear from the letter. But if William wasn't Cassian's biological father, then you're not." I trailed off, looking at Noah with new uncertainty. He smiled gently. "Not blood-related to you. No, I guess technically I'm not. But you're still my grandmother in every way that matters." Relief washed over me. In the midst of losing so much, I couldn't bear to lose Noah too. "What about this real will?" I asked. "If what William wrote is true, then Cassian has been using a fake will for the past 2 years." Noah nodded grimly. "That's what I suspected when I couldn't find Grandpa's will filed with the county. I've already contacted Mr. Goldstein. We're meeting him tomorrow morning. And if Cassian has been using a fake will," I began, "then he's committed fraud," Noah finished. "A felony offense. Add that to financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, assault, attempted guardianship fraud, and potentially falsifying notary signatures. And he and Vera are looking at serious charges." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. My mind was still trying to process everything William's secret. Cassian's betrayal, the extent of the deception I'd been living with. "I don't want my son to go to prison," I said finally. "Despite everything, he's still my child." Noah came to stand beside me. "I understand that, but what they've done, what they were planning to do, isn't just wrong. Grandma, it's criminal, and if we don't stop them, they'll do it to someone else." "Maybe they already have." I turned to face him. "What do you mean? Vera's mother died in a state nursing facility 3 years ago," Noah explained. "She had assets that mysteriously disappeared in the year before her death. I've been looking into it as part of my investigation." A chill ran down my spine. "You think they did the same thing to her mother?" "I think it fits the pattern," Noah said carefully. "Financial exploitation often follows a pattern, and perpetrators rarely stop at one victim." I sank back onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond words. What happens now? Noah sat beside me again. "Tomorrow, We meet with Mr. Goldstein to verify the real will. Then we file a police report about the assault and the financial exploitation. After that, we can petition for an emergency protective order to keep Vera away from you. And Cassian, Noah's expression softened. That's up to you. Grandma, we can include him in the protective order or not. But either way, he needs to face consequences for what he's done. I nodded slowly, a strange sense of clarity settling over me. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be diminished, to be treated as less than I was. No more. We'll do what's necessary, I said firmly. I want my house back. I want my dignity back. And I want Cassian to understand that being my son doesn't give him the right to abuse my trust. Noah smiled a smile so like William's that it made my heart ache. That's the Grandma Ilara I remember, he said softly. Strong, fair, and impossible to push around for long. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next wouldn't be easy, but at least now I wasn't facing it alone. The law office of Richard Goldstein was exactly as I remembered it from when William and I had visited years ago. Elegant mahogany furniture, shelves lined with leather-bound law books, and the faint scent of lemon polish in the air. But I had never sat in this office feeling so utterly unmoored before. Mrs. Winslow, Richard greeted me, rising from behind his desk. He was older now, his hair completely silver, but his sharp blue eyes hadn't changed. It's been too long. Hello, Richard, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. This is my grandson, Noah. Richard shook Noah's hand, his expression thoughtful. Yes, William spoke of you often. He was very proud of your decision to pursue law. Noah nodded. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. Of course, Richard gestured for us to sit. When I received your call about William's will, I knew this was a matter of urgency. I clasped my hands tightly in my lap to stop them from trembling. So, it's true, William left a will with you. Richard nodded, opening a drawer and removing a sealed envelope. He did, and he gave me very specific instructions about when and how it should be revealed. Let me guess, Noah said. Only if Cassian failed to take care of Ilara properly. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. Precisely. William was concerned about certain tendencies he'd observed in his son. He glanced at me. I'm sorry, Ilara. I know this must be difficult to hear. Not as difficult as living through what she's experienced the past 2 years, Noah said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I touched his arm gently, then turned back to Richard. We believe Cassian has been using a different will, a fraudulent one. Richard's expression darkened. I suspected as much when no one contacted me after William's passing. May I ask what prompted you to reach out now, after all this time? Noah briefly explained the situation: Vera's assault, their plans to declare me incompetent, and the discovery of William's letter. With each revelation, Richard's expression grew more grave. This is extremely serious, he said when Noah finished. Multiple felonies. In fact, he turned to me. Ilara, I need to know if you want to pursue legal action against your son and daughter-in-law. The question hung in the air between us. Despite everything, part of me still hesitated. This was my son we were talking about, the baby I'd nursed, the child I'd raised, the young man I'd sacrificed so much for. But then I remembered Cassian's cold eyes as he told me he wished I had died instead of William. I remembered Vera's cruel words, her stinging slap, and the systematic way they had stripped me of my dignity and independence. Yes, I said finally, I want to pursue legal action, not out of vengeance, but because what they've done is wrong, and they need to face consequences for their actions. Richard nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. Then let's begin by examining William's actual will. He broke the seal on the envelope and removed several pages of legal documents. As he read through the provisions, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The house, the one I'd been forced to leave after William's death, was legally mine, not Cassian's. The investments and savings accounts that I'd been told were depleted were actually intact, held in trust for me. Cassian was to receive only $10,000 contingent upon his completion of a financial responsibility program. William was very thorough, Richard commented, setting the will aside. He even included DNA evidence confirming that Cassian is not his biological child, in case the will was contested. How did Cassian get away with using a fake will for 2 years? I asked. Most likely, he created a document that appeared legitimate and simply never filed it with the probate court, Richard explained. Since you trusted him and didn't question the proceedings, there was no one to challenge it. Noah leaned forward. What's our next step? First, we file this will with the probate court immediately, Richard said. That establishes Ilara as the rightful owner of the house and other assets. Next, we contact the police to report the assault and financial exploitation. I'd also recommend speaking with Detective Sarah Winters from the County Elder Abuse Unit. She specializes in these cases. I've worked with Sarah before, Noah said. She's excellent. Richard turned to me again. Ilara, I want to be clear about what this means. Once we start this process, there's no turning back. Criminal charges against your son will proceed regardless of whether you later change your mind. I took a deep breath. I understand, and I'm ready. As I spoke those words, I realized they were true. For too long, I'd allowed misplaced maternal love to blind me to Cassian's true nature. It was time to face reality, no matter how painful. There's one more thing, Richard said, reaching into his drawer again. William left this for you as well. He asked that I give it to you only when the real will was revealed. He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a silver key attached to a tag with an address and account number. It's a safe deposit box at First National Bank, Richard explained. William set it up in your name only. Not even I know what's inside. I clutched the key tightly, feeling as though William was reaching out to me from beyond, still trying to protect me even in death. Thank you, Richard, I said softly, for keeping William's trust all this time. He smiled gently. William was my friend as well as my client. I'm only sorry I couldn't do more to prevent what you've endured. As we left the law office, Noah touched my shoulder. Are you okay, Grandma? I looked down at the key in my hand, then up at my grandson. No, I said honestly, but I think I will be. The next morning, Noah introduced me to Charlie Mendez, a forensic accountant who worked with the Elder Justice Initiative. Charlie was younger than I expected, barely 30, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and a gentle manner that put me at ease immediately. Mrs. Winslow, he greeted me. I understand you've been through a lot. I'm here to help untangle the financial aspects of your situation. We sat at Noah's dining table, surrounded by stacks of financial documents, bank statements, investment reports, property deeds, and insurance policies. Some Noah had gathered during his investigation, others Richard had provided from William's records. I've been conducting a preliminary analysis, Charlie explained, spreading several papers in front of me. And I've already identified some concerning patterns. He pointed to a series of bank statements. These are from your joint account with Cassian, which was set up shortly after you moved in with him. Your Social Security checks and pension payments were deposited directly into this account. I nodded. Cassian said it would be easier that way. For household expenses, Charlie's expression was sympathetic but professional. The problem is, very little of this money was actually used for household expenses. Let me show you. Over the next hour, Charlie methodically laid out the evidence of Cassian and Vera's financial exploitation. They had diverted my Social Security and pension payments, totaling over $48,000, over 2 years into their personal accounts. The $45,000 I'd given them from the sale of my house had gone not to their mortgage as claimed, but to a timeshare in Florida and luxury purchases. Most devastating was the discovery about William's life insurance policy. There was a $100,000 payout, Charlie explained, showing me the insurance document. The check was issued to you as the beneficiary, but it was deposited into Cassian's personal account. Here's the endorsed check. He showed me a photocopy of the check with what appeared to be my signature on the back. I never saw that check, I said, my voice hollow. I never signed it. That's what we suspected, Charlie said grimly. This is a clear case of forgery. On top of the financial exploitation, they stole over $87,000 from you in total, Noah added, his voice tight with anger, while making you feel like you were a financial burden on them. I remembered all the times I'd skipped meals so there would be enough food for the family. All the times I'd suffered through pain because my arthritis medication was too expensive this month. All the times I'd worn the same clothes over and over because they said we couldn't afford new ones for me. Meanwhile, Vera had been buying designer clothes and luxury items. They'd taken 3 vacations last year alone. They'd dined at expensive restaurants while I ate leftovers at home. There's something else, Charlie said, his voice gentler now. Something concerning the grandchildren's college funds. My heart sank further. What about them? The accounts exist, Charlie explained, but they've been systematically depleted over the past year and a half. Nearly $20,000 withdrawn in total. For what purpose? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Luxury purchases primarily, Charlie confirmed. A home theater system, designer furniture, a week-long cruise. I closed my eyes, feeling physically ill. They stole from their own children's future. Noah placed a hand on my shoulder. This level of financial exploitation is not just unethical. Grandma, it's criminal, and we have all the evidence needed to prove it. Charlie nodded in agreement. I'll prepare a complete forensic report for Detective Winters. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder financial exploitation I've seen. As Charlie gathered his documents, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the full extent of Cassian and Vera's betrayal. It wasn't just me they had harmed, it was their own children, whose educational futures they had compromised for their own selfish desires. After Charlie left, Noah and I visited First National Bank to access the safe deposit box William had left for me. The bank manager led us to a private room after verifying my identification and the key. Take as much time as you need, Mrs. Winslow, she said kindly before leaving us alone with the metal box. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key and opened the lid. Inside were several envelopes, a small jewelry box, and a USB drive. The first envelope contained photographs, old ones of William and me in happier times. Pictures of Noah as a child playing baseball with his grandfather. Family holidays from when Cassian was younger and still seemed to care about family. The jewelry box held William's wedding ring and a locket containing a tiny picture of us on our wedding day. I clasped it around my neck, feeling closer to him somehow. The second envelope contained legal documents, copies of the real will, the trust fund details, and property deeds. William had left nothing to chance, but it was the third envelope and the USB drive that truly shocked me. Evidence of Cassian's financial misdeeds. Noah read from the label on the envelope. He looked up at me, his expression grave. Grandpa was investigating Dad even before he died. Inside were bank statements, copied checks, and handwritten notes in William's careful script, documenting how Cassian had been siphoning money from William's business accounts for years before his death. He knew, I whispered, my voice breaking. William knew what Cassian was doing, and he was building a case against him. But he never confronted him, Noah said softly, probably to protect you. We plugged the USB drive into Noah's laptop. It contained more evidence emails, financial records, and a video file dated just weeks before William's death. With shaking hands, I clicked play. William's face filled the screen, looking thinner than I remembered, but with the same kind eyes I'd loved for 42 years. "Alara, my love," he began, his voice slightly raspy. "If you're watching this, then things have gone as I feared they might. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Cassian's true parentage while I was alive. I'm sorry I didn't warn you about the financial irregularities I discovered. I told myself I was protecting you, but perhaps I was simply avoiding a difficult conversation." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've provided everything you need to reclaim what's rightfully yours. The house, the accounts, your independence. Noah will help you. He's a good boy with a strong sense of justice, so much like you in that way." William's eyes seemed to look directly into mine, bridging the gap between life and death. "Don't let misplaced loyalty to Cassian destroy you, Alara. I raised him as my own and loved him as best I could, but there was always something missing, a fundamental capacity for empathy that he never developed. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't my fault. Some people are simply wired differently." Tears streamed down my face as William continued. "Remember who you are, my love, the strong, compassionate, fiercely independent woman I fell in love with. Don't let anyone, not even our son, take that from you." His image smiled sadly. "I love you, Alara. Always have, always will." The video ended, leaving me with a profound sense of loss, but also, strangely, of renewed connection to William. Even from beyond the grave, he was looking out for me, trying to protect me from the son we had raised together. Noah put his arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay, Grandma?" I wiped my tears and straightened my shoulders. "I will be," I said with newfound determination. "William wanted me to reclaim my life, and that's exactly what I intend to do." Later that afternoon, Noah received a call from a colleague at his office who had been examining Vera's laptop obtained legally through a subpoena related to the financial exploitation investigation. "We need to go to my office," Noah said after hanging up, his expression troubled. "They've found something you need to see." The Elder Justice Initiative operated out of a modern office building downtown. Noah led me to a conference room where a young woman with a serious expression waited with a laptop. "Grandma, this is Melissa Chen, our digital forensics specialist." Noah introduced us. "She's been analyzing the files from Vera's computer." "Mrs. Winslow." Melissa nodded respectfully. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "What have you found?" I asked, bracing myself for more bad news. Melissa opened the laptop. "We discovered a folder containing documents related to guardianship proceedings. They were preparing to file a petition to have you declared legally incompetent." Though Noah had mentioned this before, seeing the actual evidence made my blood run cold. Melissa showed me draft legal documents with my name on them, claiming I suffered from progressive dementia and could no longer make sound decisions regarding my health or finances. "They were planning to have me declared incompetent?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Melissa confirmed. "And they were building a case. Look at this spreadsheet." She opened a file that documented what they claimed were incidents of my mental decline, alleged episodes of forgetfulness, confusion, and erratic behavior, all carefully dated and described. But these incidents never happened, I protested, scanning the list. I never got lost walking to the grocery store. I never left the stove on overnight. I never accused the neighbor's child of stealing from me. They were fabricating evidence, Noah explained grimly, creating a paper trail to support their petition. But surely a doctor would have to examine me, I said. They couldn't just claim I had dementia without medical evidence. Melissa and Noah exchanged a look. That's where it gets worse, Melissa said, opening another file. They had already arranged for an evaluation with a Dr. Marcus Reynolds. He's known in certain circles for providing favorable diagnoses in guardianship cases. She showed me emails between Vera and this doctor, discussing my case before I'd ever met him. They were planning to take me to this doctor under some pretext, I realized, and he would have diagnosed me with dementia regardless of my actual condition. Exactly, Noah confirmed. And once they had legal guardianship, they would have had complete control over your finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements, including the ability to place you in a care facility of their choosing, Melissa added quietly. The full horror of their plan washed over me. They wouldn't just have taken my money, they would have taken my freedom, my dignity, my very autonomy as a human being. There's more, Melissa said, her voice gentler now. We found a list of state-run nursing homes they were considering. They were specifically looking at facilities with minimal oversight and low standards of care. Noah's jaw tightened. The kind of places where residents are often neglected and families rarely visit. They were going to warehouse me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Put me somewhere I'd be forgotten. While they lived in your house and spent your money? Noah confirmed, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal. This wasn't just opportunistic financial exploitation. This was a calculated, long-term plan to essentially erase me from existence while profiting from my assets. How close were they to implementing this plan? I asked. Very close, Melissa said. The appointment with Dr. Reynolds was scheduled for next week. The guardianship petition was already drafted and ready to file. Noah placed his hand over mine. If I hadn't discovered what was happening when I did, he didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew how the story would have ended. There's one last thing you should see, Melissa said, opening a final document. This appears to be a timeline for selling your assets once they obtained guardianship. The spreadsheet detailed plans to sell my house, liquidate investments, cash out insurance policies, and even sell personal possessions of sentimental value, including William's rare book collection and my mother's antique jewelry. The total estimated value is over $500,000, Melissa noted, all of which would have been under their control as your legal guardians. I felt physically ill. They were planning to strip me of everything, not just my money, but my memories, my history, everything that connected me to William and the life we built together. Noah stood up abruptly. I'm calling Detective Winters. This goes beyond financial exploitation. This is a conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of process, and attempted false imprisonment. They need to be arrested immediately. As Noah stepped out to make the call, I sat staring at the evidence of my son's treachery. I had raised him, loved him, sacrificed for him, and in return, he had planned my effective imprisonment in a facility where I would likely have died alone and forgotten. Mrs. Winslow, Melissa said gently, I've worked on many elder abuse cases, but I've rarely seen anything this calculated. I'm so sorry you've had to endure this. Thank you, I said, finding my voice again. But in a strange way, I'm grateful to have discovered the truth before it was too late. When Noah returned, his expression was grimly satisfied. Detective Winters is on her way to Cassian and Vera's house with a warrant now. They'll be brought in for questioning today. What happens next? I asked. We meet with the district attorney tomorrow morning, Noah explained. They'll want to take your statement directly. After that, formal charges will be filed. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. The shock and pain were still there, but alongside them was a growing sense of clarity and purpose. I want my house back, I said firmly, and I want them to face consequences for what they've done, not just to me, but to their children whose futures they've compromised. Noah smiled slightly, the first real smile I'd seen from him since this ordeal began. That's exactly what's going to happen. Grandma, justice is finally waking up, eh? The following day, Noah and I returned to the house I had called home for the past 2 years, but this time, we weren't alone. Detective Sarah Winters from the County Elder Abuse Unit accompanied us, along with Richard Goldstein and a uniformed police officer. Detective Winters was a formidable woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. She had treated me with compassion and respect during our interview that morning, listening carefully to my account of the abuse and exploitation I had endured. "Remember, Mrs. Winslow," she said as we approached the front door, "you have every legal right to be here. This is your house according to your husband's valid will. You're not the intruder, they are." I nodded, drawing strength from her words and Noah's reassuring presence beside me. Richard rang the doorbell. After a moment, Vera opened the door, her expression shifting from annoyance to shock when she saw who stood on her doorstep. "What is this?" she demanded, attempting to close the door again. The officer smoothly prevented her from doing so. "Mrs. Winslow," Detective Winters said formally, "we have a warrant to search these premises in connection with charges of elder abuse, financial exploitation, assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Vera's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. You can't just barge into our home." "Actually," Richard interjected, presenting legal documents, "this home legally belongs to Alara Winslow, according to William Winslow's valid will, which has now been properly filed with the probate court. So, technically, Mrs. Winslow is the one allowing us entry to her property." Vera's expression contorted with rage and disbelief. "That's impossible. We have the will. The house is ours." "The will you have is fraudulent," Richard stated calmly, "and using it to claim ownership of this property constitutes criminal fraud." "Vera, what's going on?" Cassian appeared behind her, his expression darkening when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Before I could respond, Detective Winters stepped forward, displaying her badge. "Mr. Winslow, I'm Detective Sarah Winters with the County Elder Abuse Unit. I have some questions for you and your wife regarding allegations of elder abuse and financial exploitation of your mother, Alara Winslow." Cassian's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. We've done nothing wrong. My mother has been living here with us, receiving our care and support. Is that what you call it?" I found my voice, stronger than I expected. "Stealing my Social Security checks, taking my pension, forging my signature on an insurance check, slapping me across the face when I dropped a dish. Mrs. Winslow has provided us with substantial evidence of systematic financial exploitation and physical abuse." Detective Winters continued professionally. "We also have evidence that you and your wife were planning to file fraudulent guardianship papers to have her declared incompetent." The blood drained from Cassian's face. "That's a lie. We were only trying to get her the care she needs." "In a substandard state facility," Noah challenged. "After stealing every penny she has, you stay out of this." Cassian snapped at his son. "This is family business." That's exactly why I'm involved, Noah replied evenly. Because Grandma is family, and what you've done to her is criminal. Detective Winters intervened before the confrontation could escalate further. Mr. and Mrs. Winslow, we need to execute this search warrant. Please step aside. Reluctantly, they moved back, allowing us to enter. The house looked exactly as I had left it 2 days ago, yet somehow everything felt different. This was no longer the place where I had been diminished and abused. Now, with the truth revealed, it was simply a house, my house. As the officer began methodically searching for specific financial documents listed in the warrant, Vera turned to me, her expression a mixture of contempt and desperation. "You can't seriously believe you'll get away with this," she hissed. "Everyone knows you've been confused lately, forgetting things, becoming emotional over nothing." "Actually," Richard interjected, "Mrs. Winslow underwent a complete cognitive assessment yesterday with a respected neurologist. She shows no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment whatsoever." Vera's eyes widened in alarm. She turned to Cassian. "Do something!" Cassian stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a pleading tone. "Mom, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We've only been trying to help you." "By stealing from me," I asked quietly, "by isolating me from my friends, by planning to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a facility." "That's not, we never," he stammered. "We have the documents, Cassian," Noah said firmly. "The emails to Dr. Reynolds, the fake incidents of mental decline you documented, the list of substandard nursing homes. We have all of it." Detective Winters, who had been examining a filing cabinet, turned toward us. "Mr. Winslow, we've also discovered evidence that you forged your mother's signature on an insurance check for $100,000 and deposited it into your personal account. That alone is a felony offense." Cassian's facade of innocence crumbled. "We needed that money," he snapped. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain this lifestyle? The mortgage, the kids' private school, Vera's medical bills." "The timeshare in Florida," I suggested. "The 3 vacations last year, Vera's designer wardrobe." "You ungrateful old woman." Vera spat, her carefully cultivated image of refinement disintegrating before my eyes. "After everything we've done for you, everything you've done to me," I corrected her calmly. "There's a difference." The officer emerged from the study holding several files. "Detective, I found the financial documents you were looking for. Also, there's a safe in the master bedroom closet." "That's private property," Vera protested. "It's evidence in a criminal investigation." Detective Winters replied, unmoved. "Mr. Winslow, I'll need the combination." Cassian hesitated, then provided it reluctantly. Minutes later, the officer returned with a stack of documents and several bundles of cash. "Approximately $15,000 in cash," he reported. "Also, these appear to be bank statements for offshore accounts." Detective Winters examined the documents, her expression growing more serious. "Mr. and Mrs. Winslow, these statements indicate transfers totaling over $200,000 to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Can you explain the source of these funds?" Cassian and Vera exchanged panicked glances. "That's our money," Cassian insisted. "From my business." "The business that's been failing for the past 3 years," Noah challenged. "The one that hasn't shown a profit since before Grandpa died." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in my son's eyes, not fear for me or for justice, but fear for himself. The carefully constructed facade of the successful businessman, the devoted son, the family man was crumbling before our eyes. "Cassian Winslow, Vera Winslow," Detective Winters said formally. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, I'm placing you both under arrest for elder abuse, financial exploitation, assault, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As the officer began reading them their rights, Vera collapsed into theatrical sobs, while Cassian stood in stunned silence. "Mom," he finally said, his voice desperate, "you can't let this happen. I'm your son." I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see the boy I had raised in the man who stood before me. But all I could see was a stranger who had betrayed my trust in the most profound way possible. "Yes, you are my son," I said quietly, "and that doesn't give you the right to steal from me, to abuse me, or to wish me dead. Being my son doesn't place you above the law or exempt you from the consequences of your actions." "We'll fight this," Vera snarled as the officer prepared to escort them out. "We'll tell everyone how you've lost your mind, how that manipulative grandson of yours has poisoned you against us." "I don't think that strategy will be effective," Richard commented dryly. "Given the mountain of evidence against you and Mrs. Winslow's perfect cognitive assessment." As they were led away, Cassian looked back at me one last time, his expression a mixture of anger, fear, and something that might have been regret. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the maternal instinct that had blinded me for so long, the desire to protect him, to make everything right. But then I remembered the cruelty in his voice when he told me he wished I had died instead of William. I remembered the systematic way he and Vera had stripped me of my dignity and independence. I remembered the nursing home they had selected for me, a place where I would have withered away, forgotten and alone. No, this was justice, not vengeance. This was the natural consequence of choices they had made repeatedly, day after day, for years, after they were gone. I stood in the entryway of the house that was legally mine again, feeling both victorious and hollow. The home I had shared with William, the place where we had built our life together, now felt tainted by the betrayal that had occurred within its walls. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Noah asked gently. I looked around at the family photos on the walls, pictures that included me until 2 years ago, when I had mysteriously disappeared from the family narrative. I saw the expensive furniture purchased with my stolen money, the designer decor that Vera had insisted was necessary to maintain their image. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." Detective Winters approached us, her expression sympathetic but professional. "Mrs. Winslow, we'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to provide a formal statement. After that, the district attorney will determine the specific charges to be filed." I nodded. "I'll be there." "What happens to the children?" I asked suddenly, remembering my other grandchildren, Cassian and Vera's two young kids who were currently at school, unaware that their parents had just been arrested. "Child Protective Services has been notified," Detective Winters explained. "They'll be placed with a temporary guardian until the situation is resolved." "They could stay with me," I offered immediately. "This is their home, too." Noah and Detective Winters exchanged glances. "That might be complicated, Grandma," Noah said gently. "Given the circumstances." "They're innocent in all this," I insisted. "They shouldn't suffer because of their parents' actions." "Let me speak with CPS," Detective Winters offered. "Given that you're their grandmother and this is legally your home, there might be a possibility of temporary guardianship, especially if the children are comfortable with the arrangement." As they left, Richard stayed behind with me, helping me secure the house and ensure I had everything I needed. "Alara," he said as he prepared to leave, "William would be proud of you today. It takes tremendous courage to stand up for yourself, especially against your own child." I thought of William, his kindness, his integrity, the way he had tried to protect me even beyond death. "I just wish it hadn't come to this," I said softly. Richard nodded understanding. "Justice is rarely simple or painless, but it is necessary." After everyone left, I walked slowly through the house that was mine again, trailing my fingers over furniture and photographs, reclaiming spaces that had been denied to me. In the living room, I found a photo of William and me on our 40th anniversary, the last one we celebrated before his diagnosis. I picked it up, studying his kind eyes and gentle smile. "I wish you were here," I whispered to his image. "But in a way, you still are. You're still protecting me, still fighting for me, even now." For the first time in 2 years, I slept in the master bedroom, the room I had shared with William for decades before his illness. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The path ahead would not be easy, but at least now I was walking it on my own terms, with my dignity intact. The district attorney's office was an imposing building of glass and stone in the heart of downtown. Noah walked beside me as we entered, his presence a steadying force in the storm my life had become. "Ms. Reeves is one of the best prosecutors in the county," he assured me as we waited in a sleek conference room. "She specializes in elder abuse cases and has an excellent conviction rate." I nodded, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my skirt, a new one Noah had insisted on buying me after noticing how threadbare my old clothes had become. "I just want this to be over." "I know, Grandma, but these things take time." The door opened, and a tall black woman with close-cropped silver hair entered, carrying a leather portfolio. Behind her came Richard Goldstein and Detective Winters. "Mrs. Winslow," she greeted me, extending her hand. "I'm Vanessa Reeves, Assistant District Attorney. Thank you for coming in today." "Thank you for taking my case," I replied, shaking her hand. "Of course." She settled into a chair across from us, opening her portfolio. "Elder abuse and exploitation are priorities for our office. I've reviewed the evidence gathered by Detective Winters, and I must say, it's one of the most comprehensive cases I've seen." Detective Winters nodded acknowledgement. "Mrs. Winslow's grandson did much of the preliminary investigation. His documentation was impeccable." Noah shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "I just wanted to help my grandmother." Ms. Reeves studied him. "You work with the Elder Justice Initiative, correct?" "Yes, for the past 3 years." She smiled slightly. "Then you understand better than most how these cases typically proceed." She turned her attention back to me. "Mrs. Winslow, I want to be clear about what you can expect. Based on the evidence, we're prepared to charge Cassian and Vera Winslow with multiple felonies, including elder abuse, financial exploitation, assault, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "What kind of sentences could they face?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "If convicted on all counts, they could face up to 10 years in prison, though first-time offenders typically serve less. There would also be substantial financial penalties and restitution requirements." The thought of my son in prison for years made my heart ache, despite everything he'd done. "And if they plead guilty, we could negotiate a plea agreement, but given the severity and calculated nature of their crimes, I would still recommend significant jail time, especially for your son." She studied me carefully. "Mrs. Winslow, many victims in your situation feel conflicted about pressing charges against family members. It's completely normal to have mixed feelings about this process." "I do," I admitted. "Cassian is still my son, but what he and Vera did was wrong, criminally wrong. And if they don't face consequences, they might do the same thing to someone else." Ms. Reeves nodded approvingly. "That's a very healthy perspective." Detective Winters cleared her throat. "There's something else you should know. Mrs. Winslow, during our investigation, we discovered that this isn't the first time Vera has been involved in a situation like this." My attention sharpened. "What do you mean? Vera's mother died in a state nursing facility 3 years ago, she explained. We've reopened that case based on similarities to your situation. Preliminary evidence suggests financial exploitation occurred there as well. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, yet somehow it did. They did this before to Vera's own mother. Noah nodded grimly. It's unfortunately common. Financial exploiters often target multiple victims over time, refining their methods with each one. A knock at the door interrupted us. A young assistant entered and handed Ms. Reeves a folder, whispering something in her ear. Ms. Reeves' eyebrows rose slightly as she examined the contents. Well, she said after the assistant departed, this is a significant development. It appears Mr. Goldstein has been quite busy. Richard adjusted his glasses. I merely followed William's instructions. Ms. Reeves passed the folder to me. Mrs. Winslow, are you familiar with these documents? Inside was a thick legal document titled Last Will and Testament of William Edward Winslow, with an attached DNA report. This is William's real will. I confirmed. The one Richard showed us yesterday. Yes, but have you read it in its entirety? Particularly Section 12. I flipped to the indicated page and began reading. As the words registered, I gasped. This can't be right, I whispered, looking up at Richard. Is this accurate? Completely, he confirmed. William was very thorough in his estate planning. Noah leaned over to read the passage. Grandpa set up a trust worth $3.2 million, he asked incredulously. From what? Richard smiled slightly. William was an excellent investor, and he had a substantial life insurance policy that the family didn't know about. He also owned patents from his engineering career that continued to generate significant royalties. But why didn't he tell me? I asked, still struggling to comprehend. We lived comfortably, but never extravagantly. William was a careful man, Richard explained. He built this nest egg slowly over decades, always intending it as security for your later years. He didn't flaunt his wealth because he valued simplicity and didn't want Cassian to become dependent on an inheritance. Ms. Reeves studied me. Mrs. Winslow, do you understand what this means? You're not just financially secure, you're wealthy by most standards. The revelation was overwhelming. All this time, while I'd been rationing my medication and wearing threadbare clothes, while I'd been made to feel like a burden on my family, I had actually been a millionaire several times over. There's more, Richard said gently. The DNA report confirms that Cassian is not William's biological son. According to the will, this means Cassian's inheritance is limited to $10,000 conditional upon completion of a financial responsibility program. And if he doesn't complete the program, Detective Winters asked, then he receives nothing. Richard stated, the entire estate goes to Ilara, with provisions for Noah and the other grandchildren through educational trusts that Cassian and Vera cannot access. Ms. Reeves closed her portfolio decisively. This changes the dynamics of our case. Cassian and Vera weren't just exploiting a vulnerable elderly woman, they were attempting to steal millions through their guardianship scheme. The irony, Noah said quietly, is that if they had simply treated Grandma with basic decency, she probably would have helped them financially anyway. His words struck a painful truth. I would have shared William's wealth generously had I known about it. I would have helped with the mortgage, paid for the grandchildren's education, perhaps even set Cassian up in a better business. All they had to do was treat me with basic human respect. What happens now? I asked. We proceed with the criminal charges. Ms. Reeves said firmly, this new information only strengthens our case. I'll be meeting with their attorneys this afternoon to discuss potential plea arrangements, though given this development, I'm less inclined to offer significant concessions. After the meeting concluded, Noah and I walked slowly through the courthouse plaza, both of us processing the revelations of the morning. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he asked finally. I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? My son and daughter-in-law were facing prison sentences. I had discovered I was wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined. My entire understanding of the past 2 years of William's planning, of Cassian's true parentage, of my own financial situation had been completely upended. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's a lot to take in." Noah nodded understanding. "You don't have to figure it all out today." William kept so many secrets, I mused. The trust, Cassian's parentage, his suspicions about Cassian's financial improprieties. I thought we shared everything. "He was trying to protect you," Noah suggested gently. "In his own way." "Yes, but protection through secrecy has its own costs." I sighed deeply. If he had trusted me with the truth while he was alive, perhaps none of this would have happened. We reached Noah's car, but before getting in, I turned to face the courthouse once more. Somewhere inside that building, decisions were being made about Cassian and Vera's future, and, by extension, about mine. "Noah," I said suddenly, "I think I need to see Cassian." He looked surprised. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," I admitted, "but I need to look him in the eye one more time. I need to understand how we got here." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "I'll call Detective Winters. She might be able to arrange a supervised meeting." As we drove away, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos of the past few days. For 2 years, I had been living in the shadows, diminished, controlled, and exploited. Now, painful though it was, the truth was finally coming to light, and with truth, however difficult, comes the possibility of healing. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom, watching as Cassian and Vera were led in wearing orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed in front of them. Vera's carefully maintained appearance had deteriorated during her time in jail. Her hair lacked its usual perfect styling, and without makeup, she looked older and somehow smaller. Cassian's eyes searched the courtroom until they found me. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his features before his expression hardened again. The trial had proceeded more quickly than expected. After the revelation of William's true will and the extent of their planned guardianship fraud came to light, their attorney had advised them to accept a plea deal rather than face a jury. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Michaels entered the courtroom. The proceedings moved with formal efficiency. The charges were read: elder abuse, financial exploitation, assault, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted guardianship fraud. Vera had agreed to testify against Cassian in exchange for a reduced sentence, creating a rift between them that was visible in the careful distance they maintained even while sitting at the same table. "Before I pronounce sentence," Judge Michaels said, her voice firm but not unkind, "I want to hear from the victim in this case. Mrs. Winslow, would you like to make a statement?" I rose slowly, my heart pounding. Noah squeezed my hand encouragingly as I made my way to the podium. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. I never thought I would be standing in a courtroom, testifying against my own son. But here we are. I took a deep breath, looking directly at Cassian as I continued. "For 2 years, I lived in a home where I was treated as less than human. My money was taken, my dignity was stripped away, and eventually, I was physically assaulted. But the worst pain came from knowing that my own child, someone I had sacrificed everything for, wished me dead." Cassian flinched visibly at those words. "I raised Cassian alone until he was 3 years old. I worked multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. When William came into our lives, he embraced Cassian as his own son, never once treating him differently despite knowing the truth about his parentage. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom at this revelation. We gave Cassian everything we could love: education, opportunities, values. Somewhere along the way, those values were lost. He chose greed over compassion, cruelty over kindness. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Your Honor, I don't want revenge. I want justice not just for me, but for others who might become victims if this behavior goes unchecked. I want my son to understand that actions have consequences, that treating another human being, especially one who loved him unconditionally, as nothing more than a resource to be exploited is profoundly wrong. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Most of all, I want him to become the person I still believe he can be: someone who takes responsibility for his actions, who learns from his mistakes, who rediscovers the capacity for empathy that seems to have been lost along the way. I turned to look directly at Cassian again. I still love you, Cassian. That has never changed. But love doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior. Sometimes, love means allowing natural consequences to occur, however painful they may be. As I returned to my seat, I caught a glimpse of Cassian's face. For the first time in years, I saw something genuine there, a crack in the facade of entitlement and indifference. Whether it was remorse or simply the shock of facing real consequences, I couldn't tell. Judge Michaels thanked me for my statement, then turned to Cassian and Vera. The crimes committed against Mrs. Winslow represent a profound betrayal of trust and family bonds, she stated. The calculated nature of your actions, the extensive financial exploitation, and the planned guardianship fraud demonstrate a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior that this court cannot overlook. She addressed Cassian directly. Mr. Winslow, as the son of the victim, your actions are particularly egregious. The person who should have been your mother's greatest protector became her greatest abuser. This court cannot and will not condone such a betrayal. Cassian stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Vera Winslow, while your cooperation with the prosecution has been taken into consideration, your role in planning and executing these crimes, particularly the physical assault and the planned guardianship fraud, cannot be minimized. The judge shuffled her papers, then delivered her decision. Cassian Winslow, this court sentences you to 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months contingent upon completion of a financial responsibility program and full restitution to Ilara Winslow. She turned to Vera. Vera Winslow, in accordance with your plea agreement, this court sentences you to 2 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, specifically working with elderly populations, and participation in the restitution payments to Ilara Winslow. The gavel fell with finality, and just like that, it was over. Cassian would go to prison. Vera would serve probation. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. As the bailiffs prepared to lead them away, Cassian turned toward me. "Mom," he called, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, can I talk to you before they take me?" Noah tensed beside me, ready to object, but I placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay," I said softly. "I need this too." The judge granted permission for a brief supervised conversation in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. Under the watchful eye of a bailiff, I sat across from my son for the first time since his arrest. Up close, Cassian looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders that I'd never seen before. "Mom," he began, his voice low and uncertain. "I don't even know what to say." "The truth would be a good place to start," I suggested quietly. He nodded, rubbing his handcuffed wrists. The truth. He let out a bitter laugh. The truth is, I've been lying so long I barely recognize it anymore. Try, I encouraged. Cassian met my eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw no calculation there, no manipulation, just raw pain and something like shame. I never meant for it to go this far, he said finally. At first, it was just about the money. We were drowning financially, the business was failing. We had credit card debt, the mortgage was underwater. When Dad died and you offered to help with the house, it seemed like the answer to our prayers. You could have just asked me for help, I pointed out. I would have given it freely. I know that now, he admitted, but asking felt like failing. Taking felt like, I don't know, like maintaining control somehow. And the abuse. The isolation wishing I was dead instead of William, was that about control too? His face crumpled. I don't have a good answer for that. Vera, she has always had this way of twisting things, of making me see situations the way she wants me to see them. She kept saying you were judging us, that you thought we were failures, that you were secretly laughing at our struggles. I never thought any of those things, I said softly. I know. Deep down, I think I always knew. But it was easier to believe her version because it justified what we were doing. He shook his head slowly. But the things I said to you that day about wishing you had died instead of Dad, I can't blame that on Vera. That was me, my cruelty, my failure as a son and as a human being. The bailiff shifted, indicating our time was nearly up. Cassian, I said, leaning forward. I meant what I said in court. I still love you. I always will. But love doesn't erase consequences. He nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. I understand. I'm going to try to be better. Mom, the man in that house, the one who treated you so cruelly, that's not who I want to be anymore. I hope you mean that, I said gently, because it's never too late to change, to become the person you're meant to be. As the bailiff led him away, Cassian looked back once more. Take care of the kids, he asked, his voice breaking. Make sure they know the truth about me, but also that people can change, that mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define you forever. I will, I promised. When I emerged from the conference room, Noah was waiting, concern etched on his features. Are you okay? I considered the question thoughtfully. I think I am, I said finally. Not healed, not yet, but on the way. The weeks following the sentencing blurred together in a flurry of legal and practical matters. With Richard's help, I formally reclaimed ownership of the house and accessed William's trust. Noah temporarily moved in with me to help with the transition and with caring for Cassian and Vera's children, who had been placed in my custody after a hearing with Child Protective Services. Madison, age 14, and Tyler, age 10, were struggling to process the dramatic changes in their lives. Madison, old enough to understand the gravity of her parents' crimes, alternated between defensive anger and crushing shame. Tyler, less comprehending of the specifics but acutely aware of the disruption, had become withdrawn and clingy by turns. They hate me, I confided to Noah one evening after the children had gone to bed. They blame me for what happened to their parents. They're confused and hurt, Noah said gently. Give them time, right now. You're the safest target for their pain. I sighed, thinking of Madison's cold silence at dinner and Tyler's tearful questions about when his parents would come home. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, taking them in. Maybe they'd be better off with other relatives, someone they don't associate with their parents' downfall. You're doing exactly the right thing, Noah assured me. They need stability and love, not another disruption, and despite their anger, they know you love them. I hoped he was right. I remembered William's words in his letter and video message about being strong, about reclaiming my place in the family. Surely that included being there for these innocent children caught in the crossfire of their parents' crimes. The civil trial to recover my stolen assets began the following week. Unlike the criminal proceedings, which had been resolved through plea deals, the civil case would be heard by a judge who would determine the exact amount Cassian and Vera owed in restitution. On the morning of the trial, I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that Noah had helped me purchase my first new outfit in years. As I fastened the pearl earrings William had given me on our 40th anniversary, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different from the diminished, fearful person I'd been just weeks ago. There was strength in her eyes, purpose in the set of her shoulders. "Ready, Grandma?" Noah asked, appearing in the doorway. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. Turning away from the mirror, the courtroom was less intimidating this time. Vera was present with her attorney, looking subdued in conservative clothing that was a far cry from her usual designer wardrobe. Cassian, already serving his prison sentence, was not in attendance. Judge Raymond Chen, a dignified man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, presided over the proceedings. The trial began with opening statements from both attorneys, followed by testimony from Charlie Mendez, the forensic accountant who had tracked the flow of my stolen funds. "Based on our comprehensive analysis," Charlie explained, pointing to charts displayed on a screen, "Mr. and Mrs. Winslow misappropriated approximately $197,500 from Mrs. Elara Winslow over a 2-year period." The amount, larger than even I had realized, drew murmurs from the few spectators in the courtroom. Charlie methodically detailed each category of theft: my Social Security payments, pension checks, the insurance payout, the proceeds from my house sale, and unauthorized credit card charges in my name. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke calmly about the financial control Cassian and Vera had exerted over me, the isolation they had enforced, and the deteriorating conditions I had endured while they lived in luxury, partially funded by my money. Vera's attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Ms. Hargrove, cross-examined me with practiced precision. "Mrs. Winslow, isn't it true that you voluntarily moved in with your son and daughter-in-law after your husband's death?" "Yes," I acknowledged. "And isn't it true that you offered to help with their mortgage payments?" "I did, though I was misled about how my contribution would be used." Ms. Hargrove pursed her lips. "My clients provided you with food, shelter, and care for 2 years. Shouldn't the value of those services be considered when calculating restitution?" Richard objected immediately. "Your Honor, the defendants cannot claim credit for services that were part of a scheme to defraud Mrs. Winslow. Furthermore, Mrs. Winslow more than paid for her own maintenance through the Social Security and pension funds that were diverted to the defendant's personal use." Judge Chen sustained the objection, and Ms. Hargrove changed tactics. "Mrs. Winslow, given your recently discovered wealth from Mr. William Winslow's trust, do you really need this restitution? Isn't this pursuit simply punitive at this point?" I leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze directly. "This isn't about need, Ms. Hargrove. It's about principle. What your clients took from me wasn't just money, it was my dignity, my independence, my sense of security. The financial restitution can't restore those things, but it can establish that what happened to me was wrong and has consequences." Ms. Hargrove had no further questions after that. As the trial continued, Melissa Chen testified about the guardianship fraud they had planned, presenting the documents found on Vera's computer. Detective Winters described the physical evidence of abuse, including photographs of bruising from Vera's assault. Throughout the proceedings, Vera sat with her head bowed, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. whether her distress was genuine remorse or simply regret at being caught. I couldn't tell. On the final day of the trial, Judge Chin delivered his ruling. This court finds that the defendants, Cassian and Vera Winslow, did knowingly and willfully misappropriate funds and assets belonging to Alara Winslow in the amount of $197,500. Additionally, the court recognizes the significant non-economic damages suffered by Mrs. Winslow, including physical and emotional distress, loss of dignity, and violation of trust. He looked directly at Vera, whose attorney had attempted to portray her as a less culpable participant pressured by her husband. Mrs. Winslow, while the court acknowledges your cooperation in the criminal proceedings, the evidence clearly shows your active participation in the financial exploitation and planned guardianship fraud. These were not passive actions taken under duress, but deliberate choices made repeatedly over an extended period. Vera seemed to shrink in her seat as he continued. Therefore, this court orders restitution in the full amount of $197,500 plus $100,000 in punitive damages, for a total of $297,500. This amount is to be paid to Alara Winslow according to the schedule outlined in the attached judgment, with monthly payments to begin immediately from Mrs. Vera Winslow's income, and Mr. Cassian Winslow's portion to be addressed upon his release from incarceration. The gavel fell, marking the end of another chapter in this painful saga. As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and emptiness. The legal system had worked justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. Yet no court ruling could erase the betrayal or fully heal the wounds inflicted by those I had trusted most. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached, microphone extended. "Mrs. Winslow, how do you feel about the verdict?" I hesitated, searching for words that could encompass the complexity of my emotions. "Relieved," I said finally. "Not because of the money. No amount of money can compensate for what was taken from me, but because the truth has been acknowledged, and because perhaps my experience might help others recognize and prevent elder abuse before it destroys families." "What would you say to others who might be experiencing similar abuse?" the reporter asked. "I would tell them that they're not alone, that they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their age, and that there are resources and people who can help." I glanced at Noah, standing supportively beside me. "And I would tell them that it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your independence, and your sense of self-worth." As we walked away from the courthouse, Noah asked softly, "Are you okay, Grandma?" I considered the question seriously. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'm getting there, one day at a time." That evening, as I tucked Tyler into bed, he asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between us for weeks. "Grandma, do you hate my dad and mom for what they did to you?" My heart ached at the confusion and pain in his young eyes. I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "No, Tyler, I don't hate them. I'm angry about what they did, and I'm sad that their choices have hurt our family. But hatred only causes more pain, and we have enough of that already." "Dad says he's sorry," Tyler confided. "In his letters, he says he wants to be better when he comes home." "I believe him," I said gently. "People can make terrible mistakes and still find their way back to being better people. The important thing is that they truly understand what they did wrong and work hard to change." Tyler was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Will we ever be a normal family again?" I stroked his hair, so like Cassian's when he was a boy. "We'll be a different kind of family, Tyler. Not the same as before, but still a family that loves and supports each other. And sometimes, different can be better." As I turned out his light and left his room, I found Madison standing in the hallway, clearly having overheard our conversation. "You're too forgiving," she said, her voice a mixture of accusation and confusion. "After what they did to you, how can you not hate them? Forgiveness isn't about excusing what they did," I explained gently. "It's about not letting their actions continue to control my life and my happiness, and it's about leaving room for people to change, to become better than their worst mistakes." Madison considered this, her young face serious beyond her years. "I'm not sure I can forgive them yet." "That's okay," I assured her. "Forgiveness comes in its own time, and everyone's journey is different. For now, just know that none of this is your fault, and that you are loved by me, by Noah, and yes, by your parents too, despite the terrible choices they made." She didn't respond, but for the first time since coming to live with me, she didn't immediately retreat to her room. Instead, she followed me downstairs and joined Noah and me for a cup of hot chocolate, a small but significant step toward healing the fractures in our wounded family. 6 months passed, bringing subtle shifts in our reconstructed family life. The house, once a site of abuse and exploitation, gradually transformed into a true home again. I renovated the master bathroom, replaced the living room furniture that held too many painful memories, and repainted the kitchen in sunny yellow changes that marked the space as truly mine again. Madison and Tyler were adapting, each in their own way. Tyler had found stability in the routine we established, excelling in school and developing a close bond with Noah, who taught him to play baseball and helped with science projects. Madison remained more guarded, but the wall of hostility had given way to a cautious rapport. She had begun confiding in me about school and friends, and occasionally even sought my advice. They visited Cassian monthly at the prison, supervised visits that were awkward at first, but gradually evolved into meaningful connections. Vera, completing her community service at a senior center, saw the children weekly for dinner at our house, an arrangement that had been tense initially, but slowly improved as she demonstrated genuine efforts to change. On a crisp autumn morning, I received a letter from Cassian. Unlike his previous communications, which had focused primarily on the children or his prison routines, this one addressed our relationship directly. "Mom," he wrote, "I've been participating in a restorative justice program here, where we examine the impact of our crimes on our victims and the community. For the first time, I'm truly grasping the magnitude of what I did to you. Not just the money, not just the physical abuse, but the systematic way I diminished you, isolated you, made you feel worthless and burdensome when you have never been anything but generous and loving." Tears welled in my eyes as I continued reading. "I remember now how you worked 3 jobs when I was little so I could have school clothes and birthday parties. How you never missed a baseball game or school play no matter how exhausted you were. How you made sure I felt wanted and special even when my biological father abandoned us." His words transported me back through decades to the tiny apartment we'd shared before William, to the struggles and joys of raising a child alone, to the fierce love I'd felt watching my little boy grow. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who you really are, of who I was supposed to be. I let greed and Vera's manipulation make me forget the values you raised me with. I'm not offering these insights as excuses. Nothing can excuse what I did. I'm sharing them because I want you to know that I'm finally facing the truth about myself, and I'm committed to becoming someone different, someone better. The letter went on to describe his participation in the prison's financial responsibility program and literacy initiatives, where he was teaching fellow inmates to read. He mentioned therapy sessions where he was exploring the roots of his entitlement and lack of empathy. "I don't expect forgiveness," he concluded. "I don't even know if I deserve it. But I want you to know that your strength in standing up to me, in refusing to enable my destructive behavior, has given me the chance to finally confront who I've become and begin the long process of change. For that difficult gift, I will be forever grateful. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, my emotions too complex to untangle in the moment. Was this genuine remorse and growth, or another manipulation? Only time would tell. But something in his words rang true in a way his previous apologies hadn't. That afternoon, Noah arrived for our weekly lunch, bringing news of his own. "I've been offered a promotion," he announced as we sat on the back porch with sandwiches and iced tea, Director of Legal Services for the Elder Justice Initiative. "Noah, that's wonderful," I exclaimed. "You've worked so hard for this." He smiled, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "It would mean more responsibility, longer hours. I'm not sure if the timing is right, with everything still settling here." I reached across the table to clasp his hand. "Don't you dare turn it down on my account. I'm not the fragile woman you rescued 6 months ago. I can manage this household. And Madison and Tyler are doing well. Are you sure the position would start next month?" "Absolutely sure," I insisted. "William would be so proud of what you've accomplished. And so am I." Noah's expression softened at the mention of his grandfather. "I still miss him." "So do I admitted. "Every day. But I've come to realize that he's still with us in so many ways, in the values he instilled, in the protections he put in place, in the love that continues even after he's gone." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching butterflies dance among the roses I'd planted in the spring, a garden of new beginnings. "I got a letter from Cassian today," I said finally. Different from his others, more honest, somehow. Noah listened attentively as I summarized the letter's contents. "Do you believe him?" he asked when I finished. "About changing?" I considered the question seriously. "I want to," I said, "but I'm cautious. Real change takes time and consistent effort. We'll see if his actions match his words when he's released." "When is his parole hearing?" 3 months from now, if he's approved. He could be out by Christmas, assuming he completes the financial responsibility program. Noah nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you feel about that possibility?" It was a question I'd been asking myself since receiving notice of the hearing date. "Mixed," I admitted. Part of me is hopeful that he's genuinely changing, that we might rebuild some kind of relationship. Another part is anxious about having him back in our lives, afraid of being vulnerable to hurt again. "That's completely understandable," Noah assured me. "And you don't have to decide everything now. You can take it one step at a time. Maintain whatever boundaries you need to feel safe." His words reminded me of how far I'd come from the woman who had automatically accepted mistreatment, who had prioritized everyone's needs above my own, who had confused self-sacrifice with love. "I've learned a lot about boundaries this past year," I said with a small smile, "and about the difference between forgiveness and allowing myself to be mistreated again." Noah smiled back. "Grandpa would be proud of that too." Later that week, I received an unexpected visitor. Helen, my sister who had stopped calling after Cassian and Vera told her I'd called her a bitter old maid, stood nervously on my doorstep. "Alara," she said hesitantly, "I hope it's okay that I came. I read about what happened in the newspaper, and I've been trying to work up the courage to reach out." I opened the door wider. "Come in, Helen. It's been too long." Over coffee, we began the delicate process of reconnection. Helen explained how Cassian had convinced her I no longer wanted contact, how she had been hurt, but eventually accepted what she thought was my wish for distance. "I should have tried harder," she said, regret heavy in her voice. "I should have come to see you directly instead of taking Cassian's word." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "But we're here now, and that's what matters." By the time she left, we had made plans for a weekend visit, the first step in rebuilding our relationship. As I waved goodbye from the porch, I felt another piece of my fractured life shift back into place, not exactly as it had been before, but perhaps stronger for having been broken and mindfully repaired. That evening, as Madison helped me prepare dinner, she asked unexpectedly, "Do you think Mom and Dad will ever get back together? After Dad gets out of prison?" The question caught me off guard. Vera had filed for divorce shortly after Cassian's sentencing, a move that had seemed more pragmatic than emotional given their circumstances. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "That would be up to them. Right now, they're both focusing on becoming healthier people and better parents. Whatever happens between them, they both love you and Tyler very much." Madison chopped vegetables with more force than necessary. "Sometimes love isn't enough, is it?" The insight from a 14-year-old struck me with its simple wisdom. "No," I agreed softly. "Love needs to be paired with respect, honesty, and kindness to truly work. Without those things, it can become twisted into something harmful." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I used to think you were weak," she admitted suddenly. "When you lived with us before, and Mom and Dad treated you so badly, I thought you just took it because you weren't strong enough to stand up for yourself." Her candor was startling but refreshing. "In some ways, you were right," I told her. I had lost sight of my own worth. I confused love with allowing myself to be mistreated. "But you're different now," she observed. "Stronger." "I found my way back to who I really am," I explained. "Sometimes we lose ourselves for a while, but that doesn't mean we're lost forever." Madison considered this as she continued chopping. "I want to be strong like you," she said finally. "Not the way Mom tried to be strong, controlling everything and everyone, but the way you are now, kind but not a doormat." I smiled at her description. "That's a good goal for all of us, I think." As we continued preparing dinner together, I marveled at how this difficult journey had unexpectedly created space for new connections and understandings with Madison, with Helen, perhaps eventually even with Cassian. The path ahead remained uncertain. Cassian's potential parole, Vera's ongoing transformation, the children's emotional healing, all were works in progress with no guaranteed outcomes. But for the first time in years, I faced that uncertainty not with fear, but with a quiet confidence in my ability to navigate whatever came next. 3 months later, I sat in a small conference room at the state correctional facility, waiting for Cassian to be brought in for our first private conversation since his sentencing. His parole hearing was scheduled for the following week, and after much deliberation, I had decided to attend and speak on his behalf conditionally. But first, I needed to look him in the eye, away from the children's presence, and determine for myself whether the changes he claimed in his letters were genuine. The door opened, and Cassian entered, escorted by a guard who remained discreetly by the door. He looked different, thinner, his face more lined, but also somehow clearer. The prison-issued clothing hung loosely on his frame, and his once perfect haircut had grown out into a simpler style. "Mom," he said softly, taking the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming." "Hello, Cassian," I replied, studying him carefully. "You're looking well." A slight smile crossed his face. "That's generous of you to say. Prison food and constant stress aren't exactly beauty treatments." His attempt at humor felt genuine rather than manipulative, a small but significant difference from our past interactions. "I've been reading your letters," I said, getting directly to the point. "And I've spoken with the children about their visits. They seem to think you're changing." Cassian nodded, his expression serious. I'm trying every day. It's not a straight line. I still catch myself falling into old thought patterns, entitlement, self justification, but I'm learning to recognize those moments and redirect them. The parole board will want concrete evidence of rehabilitation, I noted, not just good intentions. I know. He straightened slightly. I've completed the financial responsibility program with high marks. I've been teaching literacy classes to other inmates. I've been in therapy twice weekly, working specifically on empathy development and accountability. He hesitated, then added, I've also been making restitution payments from my prison wages. It's not much, just $42 a month, but it's something. I hadn't known about the payments, small as they were. It was a symbolic gesture, but symbols matter. Your parole hearing is next week, I said. Have you thought about what happens if you're released, where you'll live, what you'll do? Cassian looked down at his hands. I won't ask to come back to the house, if that's what you're worried about. I know I've lost that right. The parole officer has approved a halfway house placement, and I've been offered a job at the Literacy Foundation that partners with the prison program. The answer surprised me. It was practical, humble, and didn't assume entitlement to family support. And the children? I asked. I'd like to see them, of course, he said cautiously. But I understand that would be on your terms, with whatever supervision you feel is necessary. I know rebuilding trust will take time, if it's possible at all. I studied him, trying to see past the surface to the truth beneath. Was this the real Cassian emerging, or an elaborate performance for the benefit of his parole chances? Why did you do it? I asked suddenly, the question that had haunted me for months. Not the financial part you've explained about the debts, the failing business, but the cruelty, telling me you wished I had died instead of William, allowing Vera to isolate and abuse me, planning to have me declared incompetent and warehoused in a facility. What could possibly justify that level of inhumanity toward your own mother? Cassian flinched as if I'd struck him, but he didn't look away. There's no justification, he said quietly. None whatsoever. I could tell you about how Vera gradually poisoned my perception of you, how our financial desperation made me willing to rationalize increasingly horrible actions, how I developed a habit of dehumanizing anyone who stood between me and what I wanted. He shook his head slowly. But those are explanations, not excuses. The truth is simpler and uglier. I became a person who valued money and status more than human decency. I convinced myself that my comfort mattered more than your dignity or even your life. The stark honesty of his answer took me aback. There was no minimizing, no deflection to Vera or circumstances, just a clear-eyed acknowledgement of his moral failure. How do I know you won't revert to that person once you're released? I asked, once the constraints of prison are removed. You don't, he admitted. I can't offer guarantees, only evidence of the work I'm doing and my commitment to continue it. The person I became didn't develop overnight, and becoming someone different is a lifelong process, not a one-time decision. He leaned forward slightly. But I can tell you this, I've experienced what it feels like to truly confront the harm I've caused, to sit with that knowledge without excuses or evasions. And once you've really seen yourself that clearly, it's harder to go back to comfortable self-deception. I considered his words, weighing them against my own experiences of change and growth over the past year. I had transformed from a woman who accepted mistreatment as her due to someone who stood firmly in her own worth. Could Cassian undergo a similar transformation, from someone who inflicted harm to someone who contributed positively? The parole board has asked if I'm willing to speak at your hearing, I said finally. To share my perspective as the victim of your crimes. Cassian nodded, resignation in his eyes. I understand if you need to oppose my release. You have every right. I'm not planning to oppose it, I said, watching his expression carefully. But my support comes with conditions. Hope flickered across his features, quickly tempered with caution. What conditions? First, you will continue therapy after release, focusing specifically on maintaining the changes you've begun here. I held up a hand as he started to nod. I don't just mean the minimum required by parole. I mean serious, long-term commitment to becoming the person you claim you want to be. Agreed, he said without hesitation. Second, your relationship with the children will be rebuilt gradually, under my supervision initially, with their emotional well-being as the priority. Of course, he agreed. They've been through enough because of my actions. Third, I continued, you will maintain distance from Vera until you've demonstrated the ability to resist falling back into toxic patterns. I won't have the children exposed to the same dynamic that led to your crimes. This condition seemed to give him pause, but after a moment, he nodded. That's fair. Vera and I have already agreed to proceed with the divorce. We both recognized that our relationship was unhealthy in fundamental ways. Finally, I said, meeting his gaze directly, you need to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean the automatic restoration of trust. If I support your parole, it's because I believe in the possibility of redemption, not because I'm willing to be vulnerable to abuse again. Cassian held my gaze steadily. I understand, and I wouldn't expect anything else. Trust has to be earned, especially after it's been so thoroughly betrayed. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our history and the uncertainty of our future hanging between us. There's something else you should know, Cassian said finally. Something I've never told you. When I was about 16, I found out that William wasn't my biological father. This revelation startled me. You knew all this time. He nodded. I overheard you and William arguing one night. Not about me directly, but about some letters from my mother's past. William said something about knowing the truth about my parentage. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked, trying to process this new information. At first, I was just shocked and confused. Then, as I thought about it more, I started to feel resentful, like I'd been living a lie, like I didn't really belong. He sighed deeply. I think that's when things started to change between William and me. I pulled away, became more difficult, more entitled. I was testing him, in a way, seeing if his love had limits. William loved you completely, I said softly. Biology never mattered to him. I know that now, Cassian acknowledged. But back then, I couldn't see it, and that resentment festered over the years, turned into something ugly. When he got sick, part of me apart, I'm deeply ashamed of now felt a kind of vindication. Like his illness somehow proved he wasn't really my father, wasn't really invincible. The insight into Cassian's psychology helped me understand, if not excuse, some of the distance that had developed between him and William in the later years. After he died, Cassian continued, transferring that resentment to you was easy, especially with Vera constantly suggesting you were judging us, looking down on us. I told myself that since William wasn't really my father, you weren't really my mother in the same way, that I didn't owe you the same loyalty or respect. I carried you for 9 months, I said quietly. I raised you alone for 3 years before William came into our lives. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. Tears welled in Cassian's eyes. I know. That's what makes what I did so unforgivable. You were always there for me, always in my corner, and I repaid that lifetime of love with cruelty and betrayal. A tear slipped down his cheek. When you were living with us, there were moments, brief moments, when I'd see the pain in your eyes and feel this flash of shame and horror at what we were doing. But I'd push it away, tell myself you deserved it somehow, that you were manipulating me with that hurt look. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The program here calls it dehumanization, the process of convincing yourself that someone doesn't feel pain the way you do, doesn't deserve the same consideration you'd give a real person. It's how people justify terrible acts. It's how I justified what I did to you. The guard cleared his throat, indicating our time was almost up. I don't expect forgiveness, Cassian said, his voice steadying. But I want you to know that I see clearly now what I did, and I'm committed to never becoming that person again. I studied my son, this man who had hurt me so deeply, yet who still, despite everything, remained my child. The boy I had nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, comforted through heartbreaks. I do forgive you, Cassian, I said finally. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of hatred. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the harm never happened. It means I'm choosing to release the power that harm has over my future. Relief and gratitude flooded his expression. Thank you, he whispered. I know how much that means, coming from you. As the guard signaled that our time was up, I added, I'll speak at your parole hearing. I'll tell them I believe in the possibility of your rehabilitation. The rest will be up to you to prove, day by day, that their trust in mine isn't misplaced. Cassian nodded, standing as the guard approached. I won't let you down. Not again. Whether he could keep that promise remained to be seen. But as I watched him being led away, I felt a cautious hope that perhaps, from the ashes of our broken relationship, something new and healthier might eventually emerge. Not the blind trust of before, but something more balanced, a relationship between adults who recognized both the power of love and the necessity of boundaries. 1 year later, I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The garden I'd planted had flourished roses climbing trellises, hydrangeas in full bloom, herbs spilling from terracotta pots. It was, in many ways, a metaphor for the past year, careful tending yielding gradual, beautiful results. Madison, now 15, pushed through the screen door, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. Grandma, Noah just called. He's running about 15 minutes late for dinner. Thanks, sweetheart, I replied, accepting the glass she offered. Everything else is ready whenever he arrives. She settled into the chair beside me, tucking her legs beneath her in a gesture so reminiscent of myself at her age that it made me smile. The sullen, angry teenager of a year ago had blossomed into a thoughtful young woman who, while still navigating the complexities of adolescence, had found her footing in our reconstructed family. Dad called earlier, she said casually, sipping her tea. He got that promotion at the Literacy Foundation, Assistant Director of Community Outreach. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. He's worked hard for that. Cassian had been paroled 10 months ago and had adhered rigorously to the conditions we'd discussed. He lived in a small apartment across town, maintained his therapy appointments, and had built a new career at the Literacy Foundation where he'd started as a volunteer. His relationship with the children had been carefully rebuilt, beginning with supervised visits and gradually expanding to weekend stays at his apartment. He wants to take us camping next month, Madison continued, for Tyler's birthday. He said to ask if that would be okay with you. The request represented a significant step, the first overnight trip without my direct supervision. I considered it thoughtfully. I think that would be fine, I decided. Your father has shown consistent responsibility this past year. Madison smiled, a mixture of relief and excitement in her expression. Cool. Tyler will be psyched. From inside the house came the sound of the front door opening, followed by Tyler's excited voice greeting Noah. Madison and I rose to join them, moving into the warm, renovated kitchen that had become the heart of our home. Noah hugged me, looking tired but satisfied after a long day at the Elder Justice Initiative, where he now served as director. Sorry I'm late, Grandma. We had a new case come in just as I was leaving. No apology needed, I assured him, squeezing his arm affectionately. Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. As we gathered around the table, Noah, Madison, Tyler, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this family we had rebuilt from the wreckage of betrayal and pain. It wasn't the family I had imagined 2 years ago, but in many ways, it was stronger and healthier than what had come before. Vera had moved to Arizona after the divorce was finalized, finding work as an office manager and maintaining regular phone contact with the children. Her community service at the senior center had evolved into a genuine interest in elder care, and she had recently enrolled in nursing courses, a transformation none of us could have predicted. My relationship with Cassian remained a work in progress, cautious but increasingly genuine. The weekly dinners he joined at our house had evolved from awkward obligations to meaningful family gatherings. He would never again have the unquestioning trust I'd once given him, but we were building something new, a relationship based on honesty, accountability, and careful respect for boundaries. After dinner, as Noah and the children cleared the table, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my sister Helen, who had driven up from Florida for a 2-week visit. Am I late? She asked, embracing me warmly. Just in time for dessert, I assured her, welcoming her inside. As we all settled in the living room with coffee and the apple pie Helen had brought, conversations flowed easily, Madison discussing her school project, Tyler recounting a baseball game, Noah sharing an update on a case his team had successfully resolved. Helen leaned close to me, speaking softly. You've created something beautiful here, Ilara. After everything you went through, it's remarkable. I followed her gaze around the room, seeing what she saw, a family connected not by perfect harmony or absence of conflict, but by genuine care and commitment to one another's well-being. It wasn't just me, I acknowledged. We all had to choose this, day by day, even Cassian and Vera, in their own ways. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit garden. On my dresser sat the small ceramic bird Mrs. Peterson's daughter had given me, a reminder that real friendship endures even when tested. Beside it was William's wedding ring and the locket containing our wedding photo, tangible connections to the love that had sustained me for so many years. I thought about the journey of the past 2 years, from victim to survivor, to someone who had reclaimed not just her home and finances, but her sense of self-worth and purpose. The pain hadn't disappeared, it had been incorporated into a larger story of resilience and growth. At 66, I had discovered that age wasn't a diminishment, but an accumulation of wisdom, of perspective, of the capacity to begin again when necessary. The woman who had once believed herself to be dead weight now stood firmly in her own power, creating ripples of healing that extended beyond herself to everyone in her orbit. Tomorrow, I would meet with the director of a new elder advocacy program at the community center, where I had agreed to serve as a volunteer mentor for seniors navigating financial and legal challenges. Next week, I would host a gathering of women from my newly formed support group for survivors of elder abuse. The following month, I would speak at a conference on elder justice, sharing my story in hopes of preventing others from experiencing similar exploitation. Life had not turned out as I'd expected. The path had twisted in ways I could never have anticipated when William died and left me vulnerable to those who should have protected me. Yet here I was, not merely surviving, but thriving, creating meaning from suffering and connection from its aftermath. As I prepared for bed, I glanced once more at William's photograph on my nightstand. "You were right," I whispered to his image. "I did find my way back to the strong woman you always knew I was." In the quiet of the night, I could almost hear his gentle response, "I never doubted you for a moment, my love." And in that peaceful certainty, I found my final healing, the knowledge that whatever came next, I had the strength to face it on my own terms, with dignity intact and heart open to the possibilities that each new day might bring. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. Marcel.